Welcome to Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast, episode 92. Hi, I'm Jill. Thank you for joining us today.
And I'm Chris. Jill and I are your co-hosts and the founders of Becoming Ellie community.
You may be asking, just what is the Becoming Ellie community? We are women over 50 who are interested in being fit and healthy.
We named our group Becoming Ellie because Ellie was the Norse goddess of aging, and she beat Thor in a wrestling match. Jill and I thought we'd like to be like Ellie, fit and strong.
Yes, we would. You can find out more about us at our website, becomingellie.com, and Ellie is spelled E-L-L-I.
We talked with Pam Semanik and Angie Ridgel in episode number 44 about performance training for master women athletes. And we had such a good conversation that we kept saying, we want to talk to them again.
Well, here we are almost 50 episodes later, because this is 92 and that was 44.
Wow.
It's amazing, isn't it?
I can't even believe it.
Yeah. So at any rate, today we are lucky to have Pam Semanik join us to continue that earlier conversation.
Pam Semanik is a coach at Stelleri Performance Training, an endurance coaching group based in Northeast Ohio. For over 7 years, Pam has been coaching athletes to achieve their goals in running, cycling, and multi-sport events, as well as maintaining and improving general fitness.
Pam specializes in creating training programs for masters women athletes, those who are undergoing the menopause transition, and post-menopausal athletes who want to compete at their highest level. She is passionate about helping other masters women understand what it takes to maintain and improve performance health and fitness as they age up, and plans to do the same herself.
We cover a lot today, so let's go to the podcast. Welcome back, Pam. Pam's from Stelleri Performance Training, and she's here to talk with us more in depth because we had a lot more questions for her. So welcome, Pam.
Well, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you for joining us. It's really good to see you again.
It's great to be here. I appreciate you inviting me back to the show. I love your podcast.
Thank you. So shall we just jump right in and ask you, do athletic women have fewer or less severe menopause symptoms than sedentary women? Let's just start with menopause.
Sure. Let's start with that. And maybe let me give you a little bit of background. I am very interested in issues with athletes and menopause, only because I've been there, done that, and I saw how disruptive it was for my athletic performance and my training. And because of the fact that I was never really warned about this, women have been going through menopause from the time there were women. And it just seems like it was unusual for me to have to become a menopausal athlete without having anybody tell me what to expect or how to deal with some of the things that menopausal women run across.
Well, let's back up a little bit. You said it was disruptive to your athletic performance. What was different?
Wow, so much. And I'll tell you, it was, so first comes the hot flashes, right? I reached menopause at around age 51, which is sort of the typical menopausal age. And prior to that, I was a pretty competitive athlete. I competed in cycling events, in duathlon, competed at nationals, championships, even world championships. Having that athletic lifestyle was, it's just the thing that I did when I was becoming menopausal. So during perimenopause, before you actually get to the point in time that is considered menopause, that's when all your hormones are in flux. And I started having all kinds of symptoms, including, the hot flashes, which at first didn't seem to be a big deal until they became debilitating. Sleep disturbances. And I think that has a lot to do with hot flashes, but it also has to do with some of the cognitive changes that happen. Training became a lot harder. I was not able to regulate temperature as well. So I would be doing a workout and I would be sweating buckets and just feeling miserable. Whereas prior to that time of my life, it's just something that you dealt with. You did a workout, you got hot, you sweated, you open the window, you keep going. And Now it was much more significant. I also had issues with more injury, a lot more, especially with running. I would have ligament, tendon things going on. My feet actually got bigger. It's the weirdest thing ever.
Oh, yeah.
I went from a size 8 shoe to a 9.5 in 2 years, and I'm not joking. I needed more recovery. And there were times where it was just really hard to do the workout. I just didn't feel recovered. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel like the return on my training investment was the same. It was definitely an uphill battle.
Wow. So I think most women have maybe not all of those symptoms, but many of them, and
maybe even more.
And yes, and maybe even more. There's all sorts of things. And menopause is not something that anyone ever really talks about, except occasionally you'll hear a man make a joke about having to live with a menopausal woman or whatever. But that's about the extent of our discussion of menopause up until recently.
And if I hear the term mental pause one more time coming from someone of the male persuasion, they're going to find out what menopause really can do to you. I totally agree. I hope that in recent years, it seems like the conversation is changing, that there are those of us who want to talk about it more, who want to address it in terms of, especially in terms of athletes, because I think we're seeing a significant shift in demographic. I know that when I race, most of the field is women now, and a lot of them are women who are age 40 and over.
Right.
Having the conversation, I think we need to start having the conversation. We need to start talking to each other.
So would you say that the symptoms are more or less severe with athletes compared to sedentary women?
I love this question. And the common wisdom is that if you are athletic, then you will breeze through menopause, just like you will breeze through a lot of other, Chris is laughing,
Sorry.
Just like you will breeze through so many other things in life, including, other health risks and whatnot. And for the most part, for health risks, exercise is critical. And it's, in my experience, it's mandatory. But I've also I've read studies or read articles from athletes that said, I am this great athlete and I breezed right through it. I never had a menopausal symptom. And I think it's because I'm, such a great athlete. Well, here's me suffering. And so I challenged that. And I thought, what am I not working out hard enough? Is 8 hours a week of training and, training for world championships, is that not significant enough to alleviate some of these symptoms? Angie Ridgel and I, so Dr. Ridgel and I, we both are Stelleri Performance Training. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we decided that we would pursue this a little bit deeper because I think it's doing athletic women a disservice by telling them that if you work out harder, you're not going to have a hot flash. We actually did a survey, and we surveyed many of the women here in Northeast Ohio and abroad. And I sent an email to women that I know from other parts of the country, women that I know were menopausal. So that was part of the survey qualifications, is that you had to be in perimenopause or menopausal in order for the results to be tallied. But we asked, what kind of symptoms are you having? Are they severe? Are they, did you just fly right through menopause? You didn't notice it because you're an athlete. And what we're finding is that there really is no correlation between being an athlete and your menopausal symptoms. It's really a lot of our women athlete community have had significant issues with menopause. So I want athletic women to understand that, if you are having symptoms of menopause, it's not because you're not working out hard enough. It's just the way things are.
That sort of feels like something that happens a lot, which is by saying you're not a good enough, if you're a good athlete, if you're a strong athlete, you won't have problems. That's sort of making it then your fault if you are having problems. Because then you go to exactly what you're saying. Am I not actually working out hard enough? Am I not doing enough? And it's not like there's a fault there. There's not a blame.
It's spot on, Jill.
And cortisol definitely affects performance. And when you do a lot of heavy workout, that can increase cortisol, correct?
So cortisol is a stress hormone. And
Yes.
cortisol it's also attenuated by estrogen. And without getting too deep into the science, because I'm going to leave that to the scientific experts, and I could point you to some resources. Estrogen will help to ameliorate some of the effects of that cortisol stress. Yeah, when you work out, you do put stress on your body, but there are also stresses that we have just through living that we are not able to manage as well because we don't have that estrogen hormone complement to take care of that. So it becomes a problem for women.
So what changes happen that negatively impact a woman's physiology? When I think we covered a little bit, there's probably some other things too. You mentioned joints and tendons. Can you explain a little bit about why that happens?
Yeah, exactly. So, and again, let's talk a little bit about just the whole phases around perimenopause and menopause. And just for clarification, menopause is actually one point in time, right? Somebody says, I am menopausal. You really mean that you are post-menopausal. If you're premenopausal, you're still having a regular menstrual cycle. And by regular, that could be erratic. It just depends on the person, right? But you are still having a cycle. When you're in perimenopause, it's when your hormones start to go haywire because you are, you've got some anovulatory phases. And so you don't have the same hormones being released. And so your hormone levels fluctuate wildly, which starts to cause some of these menopausal symptoms that we're seeing. And then at some point in time, your body stops ceasing to produce an egg. This is menopause. This is the point in time where you no longer will have a menstrual period. We don't really know what time that is until a year later. So it's diagnosed retroactively. You have to not have a period for 12 months in order to be considered menopausal. Does that make sense?
I think we should start picking that day and making it into a celebration. We should have our menopause party.
Yeah, there are some good things, but it doesn't feel like it when you're going through the pairing part.
It doesn't. And even after, so what happens after that, that point in time is that your estrogen and your progesterone flatline. You go from having these wild, crazy, fluctuations in estrogen and progesterone, but you still have them. Then after menopause, they really just drop down to a super low level and they just stay there for the rest of your life. And what happens then to your physiology is that estrogen and progesterone work together they're very complementary, but they're protective. They help to build bone. They help to have the bone turnover, so healthy bone creation, and elasticity is reliant on those hormones. Cognitive function, when we're talking about brain fog and all these anxiety, depressive or disorders that we're having, a lot of that has to do with your hormone, the chemical makeup now in your brain. And so these things translate to a lot of, the crazy stuff that we see from a physiological standpoint, including, Chris, like you were asking about joints and tendons, your body's ability to repair itself. And that becomes really critical. And I think what we need to know as athletes is, does that mean that, we can no longer do the things that we have been doing, or can we no longer enjoy the strength and the power and the endurance that we did prior to this point? And again, that's why I'm here. That's why I am, it is my mission to figure out what we need to do in order to stay as strong and resilient as possible so that we can be athletes for life.
Wow. So, right. So what's the answer to that? What do we have to do?
That's what I was thinking.
There's been a lot of research lately. I first looked at I don't know if you guys know Joe Friel. He's an endurance coach. He's been on the scene for a very long time. He wrote a book called Fast After 50. And that was the book that I picked up to just kind of get a sense of what's going on, what's happening in the body, what changes are happening. So, the caveat to that is Joe's a guy and he wrote it not necessarily for women, but men do also have these decline in performance and the ability to build strength and things like that. They just don't have it as abruptly as women do.
Right. And they do have hormonal changes.
Absolutely. They absolutely do. And so they will still be experiencing some of the detrimental effects that women do. But I often joke that if it happened to guys the way it happened to women, they would have solved this problem already.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt of that.
That's right.
No doubt. But so anyway, a lot of the recent science around what you need to do in order to facilitate those adaptations, you have to do them. You have to find a different way to stimulate the bone building and the bone growth and the neuromuscular response. You have to find a way of doing that because you can no longer rely on your estrogen and your progesterone to help you. There's another doctor, her name is Dr. Stacy Sims. She definitely has a lot of good advice for women specifically. And she actually has a course that you can take online. If you look her up, she's got a really good, it's a Menopause for Athletes course. There's a lot of science in it, a lot of great advice. And she goes into great detail to tell you about what are the things that you need to do. But there are a few adaptations that are strongly recommended for not only menopausal women, but for perimenopausal women too. So any woman over 40 needs to be lifting weights. You need to have resistance training incorporated into your weekly workout, no exceptions. And you have to adapt enough so that you can begin to lift heavy weights. So the reason why we strongly suggest resistance training is because, again, you need an outside stimulus to help you build that bone, build that muscle, keep your muscle fibers strong. It's really building strength, not actually building, big muscles. There's a neuromuscular adaptation that goes along with that. And let's face it, as we get older, we've seen how women can become frail and, you become osteoporotic. You don't have the same bone density. Resistance training is the cure for that. And I'm going to come out, I'm very opinionated about this. I'm going to come out and I'm going to say, this is not optional. And so when women tell me, I don't want to go to the gym, or I'm just going to lift soup cans from my cabinet a couple times a week, that's not doing it. Whether you want to go to a gym or not, you have to have access to progressively heavier weights because you want to adapt those changes. And you really just can't do it by body weight alone. You have to tax your system.
Right. What about things like resistance bands?
I think they're a good start. And let's face it too, during COVID, a lot of us did not want to go to a gym or felt easy to do that. And that's why, you couldn't buy weight training equipment online because
right. All those kettlebells were sold.
And if you found one, they were $1,000.
Right.
Exactly. And I think that's a good start. And even though I advocate lifting heavy weights, we always say LHS, lift heavy stuff. We don't want you to start there. If you haven't been on a resistance training program, resistance bands are fantastic. And there are ways of making them more challenging. You just have to kind of go through that progression and first work on the form so that you are lifting it using proper form so you're not injuring yourself that way. But I think it's a good start, but I really strongly suggest progressive weights.
Okay. So either you're going to end up either going to the gym or investing in dumbbells or kettlebells or something.
Or risking osteoporosis later in life. You're close, right? And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that so many of us think, oh, that's hard. I don't want to do it. And I'm thinking, I don't know if that's any harder than, having to take Fosamax, when you're 80 years old because you can't walk more than 3 steps.
Recover from fractures, right? I mean, you pick your heart.
Right. Exactly.
Definitely.
So what about HIIT? Can you define HIIT and how you describe a typical HIIT workout and what role does that play? Yeah,
that's great. That's another one of the adaptations that is strongly suggested for this demographic, for perimenopausal and menopausal women. So HIIT is HIIT. It stands for high intensity interval training. And the reason why HIIT becomes so important for this group is because you need to be able to raise your VO2 max, your ability to uptake oxygen. And it's also the way that you can push yourself as hard as possible in order to keep your performance it's really great for athletes because HIIT workouts allow you to maintain a certain level of strength and power. So when we're talking about HIIT, there's also a neuromuscular component. And here's the really cool thing. HIIT workouts, and I'll tell you what they are in a second, but doing HIIT workouts also helps with your metabolic response. As we get older, most of us notice that we are putting on a little bit of extra layers, right? We have a little bit of extra layer of fat. You have more visceral fat. You get the belly fat, what a lot of people call the menopause. And doing high intensity training helps to attenuate that. And this is really important because again, you know, in Stelleri Performance Training, when we're working with our older masters athletes, we advocate doing these shorter, harder workouts rather than a lot of long, steady distance. That has its time and place, but you need to incorporate these high intensity interval training workouts. So Chris, to your question about what does that mean? We have to be really, really descriptive about this. When you're doing an interval, they're short, anywhere from, it could be from 10 seconds to 30 seconds to maybe up to 2 minutes. Short, super hard workouts. For the most part, they are at your maximum capacity of working out. And then you take a short break. So say you have a 30-second interval, and then you have a 30-second break, and then you repeat that, 4, 5, 6 times, maybe longer. You could do one set of those. You could do a number of different sets. It just depends on what you're training for, where you are in your training progression. This is something that as a coach, I can help my athletes do. Obviously, if you're new to high interval training, you start off with, fewer rather than more. And I also want to talk about what we call training to fail, especially in a high intensity interval. So say, for example, you want to do 5 very high intensity short intervals. If you can only get through 3 because you are gassed at that point, then you did it right. And I think that's part of the description of this, is that you have to go as high intensity as your body can handle for that full 20 seconds. Doesn't sound like much, but I'll tell you, if you're doing 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, that 30 seconds on is going to feel like a couple minutes, and that 30 seconds off is going to feel like you just had a chance to catch your breath.
Oh, yeah. The time off is the fastest going 20 seconds or whatever that you can ever have.
Absolutely. And it feels it too, right? But that's exactly the feel that you're going for, because this is what's training your body to better utilize glucose. And again, we talked about metabolic disorders. A lot of women, once you get to be our age, you have more issues with like the pre-diabetic. Even if you're an athlete, you're not going to control it just by food. You have to also do these workouts. And again, this isn't an option. What is your choice? What do you want to do? Do you want to stay healthy and you want to maintain that metabolism? Cool thing about this too, I know a lot of women our age struggle with their weight. I don't focus on weight. We focus on body composition. You want to build as much muscle as possible. And as you're doing these things like high intensity training and resistance training, you are building more muscle, which means that it's a higher energy draw, even when you're just sitting still. So it increases your resting metabolic rate. And if you pair that with some of the nutritional suggestions to help support that bone and muscle building, including things like taking in a little bit more protein, then you're really setting yourself up for, being resilient, being as resilient as possible, being as strong as possible for as long as you can.
So the HIIT sessions is not the same as the resistance training. I mean, you might be doing some resistance training in the HIIT, but those are 2 different things, correct?
Generally, yes. In a typical training plan that I would prepare for one of my coaching clients, I would have a high intensity interval workout maybe on one day, and then a gym or a strength training workout on another day.
Okay.
If you're a CrossFit person, or if you understand how to do, some of those really high intensity work, those moves using, say, those $1,000 kettlebells that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Then you could combine those things. And you, for example, if you're not a cyclist, because for most of my cycling clients, I will give them their high intensity stuff on the bike because it's easier. You are less prone to injury doing high intensity stuff on the bike than you are, say, running.
Right.
If you're running at maximum for 30 seconds, you are also risking maybe some of the injury that comes with your tendons and things like that.
Much easier on the joints. And speaking as someone with an Achilles problem, the biking is great for getting high intensity, short bursts, but the running can really lead to an injury if you're not careful, if you have those kind of problems.
Indeed. And that's why even if you're not really a cyclist, I love giving workouts to any of my athletes, whether they're runners or multi-sport athletes. Go on a spin bike, go to the gym if you don't have one at home, or have even an indoor trainer. I don't really love indoor training on a bike, but I differentiate that between riding a bike and doing a workout. And if I have to do a really short, these high high intensity interval training workouts, none of them last more than about 45 minutes. Most of them are under 30 minutes. But within that 30 minutes, you get, maybe 6 minutes of that crazy high interval stuff. But it's really easy to do that on a bike inside. You don't have to wait for the right weather. You don't have to wait for daylight. You don't have to worry about car traffic or the right terrain. And so I advocate, if you're going to do a high intensity interval training, I think a bike is the best way to do it. Because like you said, Chris, if you're having any kind of issues with running, you don't want to exacerbate that by going at your absolute top speed, your top end for that long of a time.
Exactly.
That's really good advice. I used to go to a boot camp class once a week, and we did a lot of HIIT sessions in there. And it was sort of a combo. I don't know, it was boot camp, but it was sort of a CrossFit type class. And so I always tend to think of the HIIT classes as being sort of a strength training session. But the bike that's a great idea.
How did you accomplish the HIIT workouts at boot camp? Was it like with the kettlebells? Was it combined?
Yeah, it depended on what we were doing, but it was a combination of dumbbells, kettlebells, running in between sessions or something. So it was sort of a get your heart rate up, get it down, get it up, get it down, pushing the prowler thing. And that is an unbelievable cardio workout, right. Just pushing that.
I'm thinking of suicides, where you do different distances and the ladder workouts.
Yeah.
Where there's a ladder laying on the floor and you kind of jump in between.
I used to complain sometimes that this feels like junior high football practice.
Especially if they use a whistle.
And it's crazy hard, right?
It was. Yes. Yes. And it was always a 45-minute class. And I remember years ago, a young woman who was taking the class was complaining to the manager that she thought the class should be an hour long instead of 45 minutes. And he said, if you are not tired at the end of that 45 minutes, you're not doing enough. You're slacking in there.
It wrong.
She said, you're doing it wrong.
Exactly right. And that's what I love about HIIT is that, like, if you only have a half an hour to work out, then instead of just, hopping on a bike or going for a walk or whatever, or going for a run at, just a regular tempo pace, get on a trainer, get on an indoor trainer and do some of this high intensity stuff. You can't do this every day. You can't do it every day of the week. You know, especially, for us, once, maybe twice a week is more than enough.
Right.
But still, you were talking about how you were doing this at your boot camp. And even though it was 45 minutes, I got to tell you, it probably was a very satisfying workout.
Oh, it was excellent.
You probably felt really, like, the endorphins were probably, you probably benefited from that. Not only that, but you stimulated bone growth, you stimulated muscle building, you helped your metabolic system.
Yes. And I would say it was probably closer to, it was a 45-minute class, but we would start with a sort of gentle warm up, get things moving. And at the end, we would cool down. So it was not 45 minutes of HIIT. It was probably closer to 30 minutes of the actual intervals.
And I did one this morning. And I got to tell you, it was one of the hardest workouts that I give to myself or anybody. And the actual high intensity portion was divided into 2 different sets, but all told, it was 6 minutes. So out of 45 minutes that I did, most of it was warm up. A lot of it was cool down, and there were some spaces in between. But those 6 killer minutes divided into 30-second intervals, oh my gosh, I couldn't have done any more. And
was that on your bike?
It was, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I did it on my bike.
If I take away nothing else from this conversation, I think I'm going to, because I do have an indoor trainer bike that I haven't used it in months now because it's been nice out and I've just been doing things outdoors, but I'll get that back. I'll get going on that. That's a really good advice.
Every woman should be doing it. And, you were talking about the warm up and the cool down. I want to talk about that too, because there's another component of training at our age that we have to pay more attention to, and that is training our parasympathetic system. And this is super critical. Again, because we don't have estrogen to help with that stress reduction and to help us to sleep better. The estrogen progesterone mix was really helping to facilitate that stuff. We, especially as women, because we do more than guys do, we have to pay more attention to making sure that we allow ourselves that downtime, that relaxation. It helps to not only control the cortisol level, and Chris, I know you mentioned cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone. It also has been shown as the hormone that gives us that lovely belly fat and that extra visceral fat layer. So you want to be able to bring that down. You want to be able to clear that out of your system. And so how nice is it at our age that we say that we have to make time for things like meditation or yoga or, maybe a massage or whatever it is that can get you to relax. It helps in the repair of your muscle, just to help with that whole system of building bone, building muscle. You need to have the adaptation piece, and that requires you to have a little bit of recovery. Women athletes have to build in more recovery time in general. So we can no longer train like we did when we were, 25, even 30 years old. We have to take more recovery time. How do you fit that all into a week? Especially a lot of us have full-time jobs. How do you make sure that you get adequate stress adaptation so that you can maintain your athletic performance or your physical health or whatever your goal is? How do you build in enough recovery time? And, how do you put that all together? And so fitting all of this stuff in, it's sort of a challenge, but it's absolutely necessary. Putting your yoga class, just booking yourself on for a yoga class will keep you honest.
Definitely. Let's back up a minute on that. Can you tell us what parasympathetic system? Can you define that for us?
Yeah. So the parasympathetic is really, it's more of the relaxation. It's more of that, you're training a system. I don't have an actual definition.
Okay.
Out at you, but it's the downtime. It's the, when you're taxing your muscles and you're actually building you're building muscle and bone. This is sort of the complement to that. You have to, find a way of bringing these adaptations into your body. And by having this ability to recover better, to sleep better, to be able to clear out all the stress hormones is going to facilitate that adaptation. And athletic adaptation, or also, like I said, if you're currently not a competitive athlete, it really also helps to manage those stress levels. We have a lot more stress levels at this age, and we have a lot less of an ability to manage that because of the hormone mix that we used to rely on.
I've heard the parasympathetic system called the rest and digest part of training, where you rebuild your muscles and you restore your body back to equilibrium. Whereas typically when you're exercising, you're using the sympathetic, and it's more of the fight or flight kind of feeling. Whereas rest and digest is the balance to that. And we often are working really hard to do the heavy workouts, the HIIT and all of that, but we have to balance that with the recovery. And I found that that's really hard when you have a lot of cortisol floating around from stressors, like sitting in front of a computer doesn't help. All the screen time that we have and just the different stresses in normal living. I don't think a lot of attention is paid to the parasympathetic side that includes maybe more now. I don't know, meditation, yoga. And I love that you included massage, because that's something I don't usually throw in there, but certainly who doesn't love a massage, right?
Right. And you're right in the sense about the parasympathetic being the time for adaptation. And, this is something that we always emphasize with our athletes, is that you can work really hard on your training. You can say, I want all these hard workouts and I don't want a day off. And we'll tell you, if you don't take that day off, you are not adapting. So if you want the benefit of all that work that you've done, you need to let your parasympathetic system take over to incorporate those changes into an adaptation system.
But what you're saying is that day off doesn't have to be just go lie on the couch and watch Netflix for the day. You could do things like take a yoga class.
And that's much better.
Take that walk then. Like you were saying, instead, if you have a half hour, jump on your bike, but on your rest day, go take that walk.
Active recovery.
Absolutely. Active recovery. it's go for a swim. We always say that, swimming, if you're a swimmer, swimming is great active recovery because it's not weight bearing at all. You're not taxing any of your joints except, unless you're doing it, with a bad technique, you might be able to hurt your shoulder or whatnot. But for the most part, getting in the water and floating in the water is fantastic recovery. And, I also think that life stress it compounds what we are already experiencing. So it makes it, doubly important that we take time for ourselves. Stress is a killer, right? We have so much more of it at this stage of our lives due to all kinds of things, including, maybe you're at a point in your life where your job is now much more demanding because you are the person with the most experience, or you're taking care of elderly parents, or you are managing, your household or whatever. We have so much more stress right now.
Not to mention a pandemic that's worldwide.
And that, right, having to work from home, I don't know about you, but working remotely is super stressful. And it comes right at a time when we are least equipped to handle it because we don't have estrogen to help attenuate some of those stress hormones that we have been able to flush out from a hormonal standpoint. Lucky us.
I want to back up to the weight gain. Is gaining weight, is that avoidable? Is it inevitable? What do you have to say about gaining weight?
Oh, gosh. Okay. And again, lucky us where we are, right?
Right.
Because of where we are with our hormones, we now have the ability to do everything that we've been doing before in terms of working out or our athletic training and not being able to burn as much fat. And we have a reduced ability to use the fat stores to, those long, steady workouts are actually counterproductive to that. It used to be that you could do like a lot of long stuff and burn, use fat for fuel. It doesn't work like that anymore. And so that's why a lot of times athletes are like, I'm riding my bike all the time, or I'm running all the time. How come I'm still gaining weight? I'm like, well, it's because of the mechanism that we have. It's diminished. You cannot burn fat the way you used to. And that's why doing things like this high intensity stuff will help with that metabolic response. It trains your body to burn more fat.
Oh.
That's a good thing. Strength, the resistance training builds more muscle. So that again helps to draw on the energy that, it uses more energy so you can keep your weight down. And like I said, I would always recommend, especially for those of us masters women, let's start focusing less on how much we weigh and more on our body composition. Don't focus so much on, what that scale says, but look at, am I building muscle? Am I keeping my activity level up? Am I doing that kind of stuff? And I think, just doing some of these techniques now, these new adaptations to replace what was happening with estrogen, doing the resistance training, doing the high intensity interval training will absolutely work on body composition.
Talking about body composition, of course, there's great numbers that you would strive for, but what is acceptable and how do you measure it?
That's great. So let's first talk about measuring. Measuring body fat it could be a pretty complex science. And there are instruments that are used in doctors' offices or labs that are very precise, very accurate. They'll tell you, what your body fat, what your ratio of lean mass to fat, that's kind of what you're looking at. And obviously you're always trying to improve that. You want to have more lean mass, so more bone, more muscle, and reduced fat. I'm not sure exactly what the clinical number is, but I think once you're hovering around 25 or 30, you're getting into what is considered clinically obese. And then if you're below that, I think that's more normal. I'd have to look that up. The way I measure it is just by using a very simple scale. There are body BMI scales, so body mass index scales. They're not super accurate. They're not, they're not going to tell me exactly what it is. But what I like to do is just kind of use it every once in a while, like maybe every couple of weeks or so, just to see if there's a huge fluctuation.
It's like any of these things, whether it's your watch or your scale or whatever, if you're getting information, you can at least see, am I trending up, trending down.
So you're saying there's a scale that they should stand on, perhaps at the gym, or if you own one, you already know how to do it.
Yeah. And you could get them. I think they're $50 or $60.
What about the calipers? I remember calipers used to be part of it.
Calipers. Yeah. Because they would like pinch parts of your arm or something. And I'm not sure exactly how the calipers work, but there was some kind of a calculation that could determine your body fat that way.
Yeah. And you can buy calipers, but I think that would be a pain.
And you know, the body mass index scales, like I said, they might not be super accurate, but if it's the one that you use, if you have it in your home, it'll at least show you. You can at least track, you know, where things are going. If you know, just to make sure that you're still kind of hovering around the same range. I don't like using scales. I don't like tracking anything anyway. But it's really just for, you know, just to kind of take a look at that and just see where you are in terms of, you know, am I on the right track? Do I need to get back to the gym? You know, what's going on here?
You mentioned earlier about nutritional suggestions.
Yeah.
What other than, and you said eating more protein, but what are your nutritional suggestions?
So I have to just be really clear that for women who exercise, for women who are athletic, I'm going to suggest that the protein supplementation is pretty critical. You know, we don't, as masters women, we don't have the same ability to synthesize muscle protein. So we don't have that ability to build that muscle naturally. So doing all these techniques that we talked about, and then supplementing that with bringing protein into our bodies to help facilitate that muscle build, I think is critical. If you are not an athletic woman, if you are not somebody who exercises regularly, I wouldn't suggest just bumping up your protein because it's also been counterindicated that, you know, increased protein intake for some populations has shown to cause cancers. But if you are athletic, what you're doing is you are creating the system that actually can require that and can process that additional protein. The common wisdom, and this is going to sound crazy for some of those of you who maybe track your macros, is that if you're an athletic woman, you should, and you're menopausal, you should be taking in at least 100 grams of protein a day. It's a lot.
Wow. What about timing of when you take in that protein? Do you recommend to your athletes certain times after they work out or times a day?
Absolutely. And I always say for most people, for most women, your meals you should lead with protein. So you should base whatever you're getting ready to eat, base it around what kind of protein are you going to take in, whether it's chicken on your salad or yogurt or an egg or whatever, and then just build around that. But for working out, I always suggest if you're going to do a hard workout, a lot of us don't like to eat before a workout.
Right.
Yuck. You know, I like to do maybe a protein shake or, you know, something, a little bit of carb and protein in it just to drink it because it's easier on my system that way. But then when you're done, when you're, you know, either at the gym or after you get back from your high intensity training, I also like to have a protein shake, you know, protein powder at that point. I also supplement with branched chain amino acid. And that is a supplement that you could buy at a health food store or online. It's called BCAA, branched chain amino acid. It is some of the essential amino acids, again, that we don't have the ability to have that muscle protein synthesis in our body. So this helps support that, particularly a BCAA called leucine. So leucine is also something that helps promote cognitive ability. I think it's super important for anybody, any woman, to maybe consider, you know, looking into BCAA and how that could affect you. Another thing, as far as nutrition goes, though, is I think that all of us, everybody that I know, need to eat more vegetables.
Yep. We have a veggie challenge going that some weeks I'm better at than others, but having 5 or more servings of vegetables a day is something I'm really trying to work on this year.
That's a great goal. That's a great goal. You know, I'm a salad person, so I used to be a morning salad person, and then I turned into a kale shake person. And now I'm, you know, just whatever, a lot of times just, you know, egg, avocado, something or other. But I think that anytime, you know, how I mentioned, I think everybody should sort of lead with protein, but also have some kind of vegetable with your protein. You know, I'm a carnivore. I kind of follow a modified paleo diet, modified in the sense that I won't eliminate carbs or I won't eliminate things like that. And it doesn't really eliminate carbs, but it tells you, you know, not to eat bread. I'm not a big bread person. I don't really like pasta, but I will, you know, I do like avocado toast.
Right. I always figure Like I went to a restaurant last week that is has excellent bread. And I thought, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to enjoy this bread. But you don't have to eat bread. I don't have to eat bread every day.
No. And, there's no reason why you can't have, you can't go to France and have bread and cheese, right?
Right. Exactly. This was a French restaurant.
But I think, for the most part, I think we really just don't eat enough vegetables. And I think you could have vegetables with every meal. And that way too, I don't like to count calories. I don't like to count macros, but if you, kind of get yourself into a pattern or a habit, I love habits. I think creating habits as an athlete for your training, for your nutritional support, I think that's, that goes a long way, especially during, in a busy life. When you don't really have to think about, what you're doing, you habitually reach for, your salad with your protein on it or whatever.
Right. You were talking about time trials, and could you sort of talk about that? And I think this has to do with what you were just saying about long endurance things, but maybe you could just tell us a bit about that.
Oh my gosh, I love time trial. Okay, so the background story is that I'm a coach for Stelleri Performance Training.
Right.
We are a small coaching group based here in Northeast Ohio. We coach men and women, but our specialty is in masters women athletes. And as we've discussed, throughout this entire podcast, we advocate things like building strength, building power, maintaining that muscle mass, because this is what women our age need to do just to stay resilient for as long as possible. Everything that we talk about, though, for those suggestions, all fits really well into training for time trial. And what time trial is, and it is a cycling thing, it's when, and I know a lot of women are a little intimidated by bike races. I know a lot of women will toe the line at a running race or, a marathon or half marathon. But coming to a bike race is a lot more intimidating for a lot of different reasons. Time trial, I think, is the most accessible of the bike racing disciplines because it's not mass start. It is one person goes out at a time, and it's you against the clock. So there is a set distance, typically 20K, which is 6 miles or something like that. You go, you have a start house, you get 3, 2, 1, go. And then you go as hard as you can over that entire course. So the courses are typically, they're not super hilly for the most part, but there could be some rolling hills or, there could be a turnaround. They're mostly on live roads. So that's a little bit freaky for a lot of people, but it's not a mass start. It's not you against anybody else. It's you against you. And it's a really cool way of gauging your athletic ability and your performance and your progression if you compete throughout the year.
Okay. So that actually, I was spectated at a bicycle race earlier this year where everyone took off and they rode around in this big clump of bikes. There were a few people that sort of broke away or were behind, whatever. But to me, that looked like the most stressful thing in the world to be in that clump of people. And there were a couple people who got injured because somebody wiped out on something on the ground or whatever. It wasn't. So I thought, I'm not doing that.
Fear of the Peloton.
Well, a lot of times I'll go to things like a triathlon. I spectate and I think, I could do that. Whatever. This looks like fun. But I did not think that at all about that bicycle race. So this sounds actually doable to me. So, okay. What was the distance you said typically?
Typically, well, around here, there's a local series around here that's 20K. So it's 12. For most of us, this is a great story. A lot of women compete, and a lot of Stelleri a lot of our athletes compete because we encourage them to do it. And so it's a lot of fun. It's a social event. You can typically complete the course anywhere from, I'm going to say 33 minutes to about 40 minutes, depending on where you are in your training. And again, there's a series of these races. So you never feel like you have to compete against anybody else except potentially yourself if you want to.
Right.
But when we did one of the races this year, and it was out in a rural area. So it was really nice. There wasn't a lot of traffic. Most of the people that showed up, I think half of the field were women. The fastest women on that entire course were all in the 50 to 59 age group.
Ah, nice.
It was amazing. And I'm chasing rabbits that are older than me. And I love it. It's just, it's such an encouraging atmosphere. It really pushes you to, you don't push yourself that hard in training. You can't possibly ride that hard for half an hour if you didn't have that external stimulus or that external motivation to do it. And this is another reason why I encourage any woman to maybe compete in something. Athletics, I think exercise has to be a lifestyle, right? You can't just say, oh, I'm just going to go for a walk or I'm going to go do whatever. I think it has to be something that you make a part of your life, and it is a non-negotiable, that you have to have enough motivation to keep doing it, to keep pushing yourself, whatever it is. It could be, a lot of people start working out because of something that scares them, that they might have had a health scare or a heart attack, a family member is having health issues and they see that maybe they have to change what they're doing and become more athletic. Fear only motivates for so long.
Right.
You have to find another external stimulation, something that makes you feel good right now, whether it's, crossing a finish line or being there with your friends or shooting for a goal, setting a goal and working towards it. Because I got to tell you, like a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to participate in that because it's not fun and I'm not going to keep going with it. Well, how many things do we do that aren't really fun, but we have to do them anyway? Right? Like I have to go to work, even maybe on the days that I don't want to. And even when I work out, I do my workouts, even when I'm like, I don't really feel like doing that workout, or like this one this morning, I dread this. This is going to hurt. But I think knowing that there's a bigger reason behind it, that, I'm doing it for making sure that I could keep doing this for as long as possible or staying as active for as long as possible. That's the motive. And I think it requires a lifestyle mindset, not just, I'm just going to go exercise.
Very well said. So tell us, if people wanted to follow you online, do you have online capabilities? Do you coach online? And where would they find you?
Absolutely. So you could look up our website. We're StelleriTraining.com. That's STELLERI training.com. Stelleri, it's a lot of people can't pronounce it. It's a Latin name for a fish. If you want to know the story behind that, go to the website and check it out. It's really kind of cool. We are also on Facebook when Facebook is up and running. You can find us on Stelleri Performance Training. And then, if you want to reach out to me or to Angie, we are the owners, proprietors, and the coaches for Stelleri Performance Training. We do have local athletes here that we work with, but we also have the ability to create virtual plans. So a lot of our athletes, we don't really see them very often, but we do communicate. And I don't think it's really required to have to, be with somebody to teach them what to do unless they request it. We do have a lot of the ability to work with us virtually. We do like to communicate a lot with our athletes. Every performance or training plan that we provide for somebody is based on their personal goals, and we keep close tabs on what they're doing, and we stay in communication, because I don't think there's ever one size fits all training. I think everybody is different and their journey is different, and we have to honor and respect that. We do more intensive coaching for some of our athletes here who are competing at events such as cycling races. We do work with a lot of triathletes. We have some people that did some of our clients had half Ironman distance. A couple of our clients had full Ironman distance. We also have ultra runners. So I work with 2 gals right now who are ultra trail runners. So we cover the gamut. We absolutely advocate for the short, fast, hard intensity interval stuff, but that doesn't mean just because you're a ultra trail runner, you're not going to see that in your training plan. You still will.
That's great. You know what? We'll link to that in our show notes as well, so that it's easy for people to find you.
Fantastic. That sounds great.
And so not all of your clients are bicyclists.
No, they're not. And when we begin to work with the client, I often ask them, not only what their goals are. So they usually come to us because they have specific goals. And it could be a race goal, or it could be really just a fitness goal. So you don't have to be a competitive athlete to work with us. It depends on what your goals are. We will work with you. You don't have to be a cyclist, but I will also ask, what kind of equipment do you have on hand? Because if somebody says, oh yeah, I have a bike and I don't mind riding it, then, I might throw that in. Or if they say I want to do mostly swimming, or I'm a runner or whatever, then I will absolutely work with them. But you don't have to be a cyclist.
Okay.
It's just, my favorite thing.
Right.
It helps because you can do those harder workouts without the risk of injury in running.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thank you, Pam, so much for talking with us today. It's been great. I'm going to get my indoor bike training thing back up and going.
Yes. Thanks so much. I really enjoyed talking with you today. Very knowledgeable.
Thanks, both of you. This is a lot of fun, and I love your podcast. Let's keep everybody out there active and happy and, just willing to try.
Okay. Yes. Good thinking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye now. Pam is such a great source of information and inspiration. It's very encouraging to hear her give some of her tips and advice. I really enjoyed talking with her today.
Yeah, she really makes you feel like, all is not lost just because you're struggling with perimenopause or menopause or post-menopause. But, we're not doomed to the stereotypes of what that means.
Yes, I really enjoyed what she had to say about resistance training, as well as, of course, the strength training. It was very encouraging and, right on. She really knows what she's talking about.
Yeah. And the HIIT training, that was good. And, I tend to think of HIIT training as being more like, I don't know, like CrossFit kind of training, more strength training. But she's absolutely right. You can do HIIT training while you're running or on your bike. And the biking actually seems like a really good way to do that.
Yeah. When I think of HIIT training, I think of circuit training, and I had an app that I used on my old phone. I don't know if I've downloaded it on this one, but it was called Tabata or something like that, where, you can change the amount of seconds for the hard work and then the rest, but it gave you a lot of opportunity to do HIIT, whether you were at a track or, doing a kettlebell exercise or what have you.
Yeah, I have done Tabata.
Tabata, is that how you say it?
Yeah. Tabata workouts. So those tend to be like 4 sets all run together with then a really brief pause in between. So
kind of 20 seconds, 10 seconds, something like that.
Exactly. And I've done some of those, and those are great workouts. I haven't done one of those in quite a while. So that's another form of HIIT training.
Yeah. Really gets your heart rate up there for a short time, and then you recover, and recovery is part of it,
Yeah.
I liked how she talked about that as well.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I think as we age, it really becomes, so it's like everything in life. As when you're 20 years old, you think nothing of staying up all night because you're going to study or go to a party or whatever, and then get up and go to work the next day. Though I'm not sure how.
Or take a test in college.
I'm not sure how effective that was, but I thought nothing of doing it. Now I think a lot about doing that. So, but yes, definitely we need to give ourselves recovery days.
Yes. And, she had some good recovery suggestions too.
Yeah. So active recovery, not just, doesn't mean lying around saying, oh, I'm tired from yesterday.
She talked about yoga and meditation, and I know a lot of people don't like it because everyone likes to do the super fast, high, hurry up stuff. But if you don't activate the parasympathetic nervous system, you can end up with some problems, at least with the stress hormones and things like that. Your hormones tend to go out of whack when you're going through perimenopause and even into menopause sometimes. And,
right.
We don't focus on that nearly as much as we focus on, the fight or flight, which is, the workouts.
Right. I know I was always resistant to doing like gentle yoga, that kind of thing. I was just like, oh, I don't need that. I want power yoga.
Yeah.
But I really try now to get over that idea, and that there is a lot to be said for for gentle yoga or some kind of more restorative yoga.
Restorative yoga. Yeah. It feels boring at first and it's really hard to settle down, which is one more reason why you should do it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yes. Yes. You know. So any rate, I feel a little inspired after talking with Pam about
me too.
Getting some of these things back in. I'm doing some of them, but there's always things you can tweak or improve.
Yeah. Even if you're stuck at home, and all you have is a little staircase down to the laundry room, you can always run the stairs or do a short workout kind of thing, just using the stairs in your house, right?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so if you're wondering, Chris and I will be talking to Angie Ridgel, the other half of Stelleri Performance Training, sometime soon. We'll get her on the show.
Yeah, it'll be really an interesting topic as well. So let us know how you're staying strong while dealing with perimenopause or menopause, or just in general, how your strength training is progressing. Leave us a message at the website, becomingellie.com, or any of our social media sites.
You can find us at Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, and YouTube. Plus, we have a private Facebook group that you can join. Just look for Becoming Ellie on Facebook.
Well, Jill, it was great talking with you today, and I'll see you next time.
Sure will. Bye.
Bye-bye.